Okay, well, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Cecil with the Tennessee Chamber here. I'm part of the Government Affairs team, and with me I have Katie Gamble, who is President and General Manager of Five Star Media Group, and Holly Sullivan, who is Director of Worldwide Economic Development for Amazon. Katie is the chair of the Community Outreach Subcommittee within the Economic Recovery Working Group that Governor Lee has put together, and Holly is the chair of the Essential Business and Critical Infrastructure Subcommittee. And they are here with us to kind of give us an overview of their committees and what they're doing and what is going on. So Katie, I will give it to you.
Well, our committee's met 3 times now. We have about 9 different people on our committee, and it's just made up of a very diverse group. We have some broadcasters on there. We have some associations on there. We have some representatives of different minority groups on there. So, because ultimately our goal is to, whatever this message ends up being, is to communicate that message to every nook and cranny in the state, to all Tennesseans. So we've had our 3rd meeting today. We're kind of a little hybrid, a little bit different, where all the other groups are meeting and they're going to be able to make recommendations and procedures for reopening. Our job is to communicate those messages. So even though we've been meeting really just to kind of get a plan together, because we're probably going to have to meet, we will have to meet afterwards, because we really don't know what message we need to communicate for the other subgroups until we've seen their recommendation. So we'll be meeting again after this to see what those messages are. But we've kind of got a good blueprint in place so that we're ready to go.
Great. Yes, I know that both committees are very unique in how you guys are handling them. And so, Holly, I know your committee is also unique in the fact that it's essential business and you guys have been open during this whole time. I'm just going to give you a chance to kind of explain that and go further into that.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity. It is also a diverse group. I think that the entire subcommittees have a good cross section of Tennessee businesses, small, medium, and large. And I think we have an interesting perspective as part of the Essential Business Committee in that we've all been working and our employees have been working through COVID-19. So we have an opportunity to share best practices of what we're doing now. As other Tennesseans start going back to work, what does that look like? And how can we ensure the safety, which will be the #1 priority for all of us, ensuring the safety of all Tennesseans. And that'll be things like, what are the CDC guidelines? How can we make sure that there's opportunities for facial coverings for employers, for their employees? What are the physical or social distancing standards look like? But also, how does that evolve as the cases are lowered throughout Tennessee also? How do we look around those corners to make sure there are less restrictions as we move forward through this process?
Great, thank you. Yeah, so that's both very important work for both of you all. So thank you both for taking the time and stepping up to lead these committees. We, as a nation, actually haven't really seen a pandemic on this scale before. Therefore, we don't necessarily know the right answer. How has this been challenging when guiding your committees to come up with these recommendations for Governor Lee, given the fact that we're kind of in uncharted territory right now?
Do you want to go first, Holly, or you want me to?
You go ahead. I'll go right after you.
Well, for our committee, first it was trying to figure out who are we targeting with the message. Because, we have the subcommittees who are coming up with the best practices for the different industries. Well, we need to figure out how those local businesses and those industries can have access to those best practices. Because as we start to open up the economy in phases, those businesses need to be consistent. And then for us, the other message was to the consumer, because there seems to be a lot of education that needs to happen on that side. And so if we can keep the businesses consistent where, maybe every restaurant's following the same guidelines, every, hair salon's following the same guidelines, then we can train our consumers how they're supposed to respond. And I think that, so for us, it was trying to figure out, we really don't know what this consumer message is yet. When we get the recommendations back from the subcommittees for the businesses, that'll help guide those decisions. But I think this has just been an uncertain time for everybody. And I think that there's been new technologies that people have used. I think that it's actually brought out a lot of good in people. I think we're actually communicating more than we might have in the past. We tend to be communicated on the phone and video, where before it was email and text. So I do hope that's something that we keep. And but for my committee, I think what we're just trying to figure out is what our next steps are, because there's so many different messages and so many different directions we should go. And there's a lot of misinformation out there right now with consumers, and there's a lot of education, and there's a lot of fear. So we need to figure out how to manage through all those things with communication.
Thanks, Katie. Holly?
That's an interesting perspective. Yeah, because we are part of the essential businesses, so a lot of us are open and maybe interacting with consumers. That's something that the committee has discussed quite a bit in our few meetings, is how do we ensure that the guidelines that we're doing as an employer, that our consumers are also following if they are walking into a retail establishment, a restaurant, or a service provider. So how do we communicate that? And it also goes back to, I believe, and we had this discussion on our committee, that there is a corporate reputation at stake here. So as consumers are making that decision, I believe that most Tennesseans are going to want to shop or purchase products from, or manufactured goods from, those companies that are making sure that their employees are safe. So it's a corporate reputation responsibility to ensure that all of our customers are receiving that information about what companies are doing. And it's a branding opportunity also of what are we doing to take those next steps, and what are those precautions that we're doing to make sure that, and me working for Amazon, I can say, we're instilling tons of different procedures and processes, over 150 we've done, to make sure that our customers feel good about receiving the products from our fulfillment centers. And, talking to the other committee members, it's amazing some of the tasks that they're also doing to make sure their employees feel safe, but also their consumers have that same level of comfort and safe as they walk through their front door.
See, and I feel like that if we can, through this process, get the retail businesses and the different businesses to respond in a similar manner, then we can manage the expectations of the consumer. Because what happens is they get to go over here and act one way, and then this one's following the rules and they don't. So then that's where the irritability comes in. So if we can get everybody consistent, then I think it will help us manage the consumer's expectations as well. That's just my thoughts.
I totally agree. And I think that's what's so great about the way the working group is being done, and the different industry sectors represented. If we can develop some level of consistency of what those safety precautions are, then there's much better opportunity to make sure our residents feel safe, but also secure in making those consumer decisions.
I had a local restaurant tell me here, and this has really not a lot to do with this conversation, but it's interesting, and it kind of does. He said, I was asking him what kind of message could we get across for him, because he's been advertising for us. And he said the most important message that any business can be putting out there right now is what they're doing to protect their employees and the consumers. Because what we used to tolerate months ago as far as cleanliness, that we won't tolerate after this. And I thought that's pretty interesting, because that's something that in consumer behavior that this pandemic is going to change in consumer behavior.
That's a really nice point. Sorry, Holly, go ahead. That's a really good point. I know working from home, we kind of talked about this even before this conversation about technology and how this is all going to change. So I've been talking to other people as well, and I don't foresee people working together in a tight, close, unless they absolutely have to in the future. So I definitely think this is changing how at least America in Tennessee is going to conduct business in the future. But for Holly, I have another question. How does Tennessee, in preparation to reboot its economy, compare to other states for Amazon's business, since you guys are such a huge scale globally and nationally?
I think each state is taking a little bit of different approach, but we also discuss this on our committee because many of the businesses represented have multi-state operations, and one of the things that we would like to make sure we're communicated to Governor Lee is there does need to be some level of consistency. As states are coming back and bringing their residents back online, it makes it more challenging for those that may have to cross state lines. I think of Chattanooga. There's communities on the Georgia side also, and making sure there's some level of communication between Governor Kemp and Governor Lee, that the guidelines, so as you have an employee may live in one state and work in another state. Mm-hmm. So how do we make sure that those workers are safe and feel that they have the guidelines to be able to cross those state lines, to be able to earn a paycheck? I think that's really important. One thing I'll also add about Tennessee is I really applaud bringing all of the business community together, and the small, medium, and large businesses together to have this conversation. And to listen to our ideas and our recommendations. And I doubt it's possible to implement all of our ideas and recommendations now, but I think it opens up the state of Tennessee to a robust policy discussion as we move forward in the next 12, 18, 24 months, beyond COVID-19 and during COVID-19, on how can we be better prepared in the future, and what policies maybe are not needed anymore, or additional guidelines that might be needed. A person on my group, which I'm not sure anybody had thought of, was the idea of the CDL licensing. Right now that's at a halt because you need 2 individuals within a close proximity to be able to do the driver test. Our drivers right now are essential workers. We need them more than ever to make sure our essential goods can be delivered from point A to point B. So how can we streamline that process? So I think there's some conversations that will help bring to light. And I really just applaud the governor's efforts on bringing all of us together and giving us a very short timeline to deliver this.
Holly, I'm in Clarksville, Tennessee. So I totally understand what you talk about 2 states, because I have employees that live in Kentucky. I have advertisers in Kentucky. Kentucky's just like 10 miles up the road from us. So we do all the time, not just during this pandemic, but have to juggle the different policies and the way things are done in each state. So I'd never really thought about it until you just put it into words, but you're exactly right.
Great, thank you. I know that's been a big topic, as well as people coming into Tennessee from other states, even if they're just coming to visit during these times. So that's a very solid point, Holly. Thank you. So the next question I have for Katie. So your group being community outreach, you're having to come up with recommendations for the state as a whole. How are you determining to reach all across the state in different types of cultures?
Well, we're not just we're not just recommending we utilize your traditional media. We want to make sure that we use different organizations that these different demographics are associated with, and just really dig down and do some grassroots efforts. In addition to that, try to find the influencers inside those different ethnic groups and have them help us spread that message. Whether it be social media or through their faith-based churches. But we want to put together a consistent message, but then we also need to make sure that message is translated in multiple languages. And we've actually isolated the most used different languages in Tennessee. So if we're going to put out a piece that's going to explain to the businesses how to respond, it needs to be also in Spanish. You know, if we're going to put together a website when that information's on there, it also needs to have audio so that if you're visually impaired, you can hear it. So we've really tried to really figure out through grassroots efforts and different closed captioning and rural radio, just different ways that we can reach groups that aren't just on the surface level, not just a 360 degree, but just really digging down. And some of it's going to have to be very specific and very specific people delivering that message to those different groups.
Great, great. Thank you. Well, that's all the questions I have. I don't know if you guys have any final comments or want to say words before we sign off here.
Well, I just would like to echo what Holly said. I think I really give a lot of credit to our governor for allowing the different industries and business leaders in the community to have a voice and have input, because this is very trying and uncertain times for everybody. And I think that there's a lot of talented leaders and different opinions out there, and being able to bring all that to one place, I think is going to help all Tennesseans.
I'll just echo what Katie said. I think that oftentimes when you have to go through a difficult moment in time, it can help build consensus, and bringing this level of leadership together, you know, really led by two major industry organizations within the state of Tennessee. And also the short time period. We often are given several weeks, if not months, to work on kind of robust recommendations such as this. But I think that learning to pivot, being flexible, being nimble during this time is really important for all of us to be mindful of, and building that consensus and learning from each other. There's no rule book right now. So how do we create the best playbook that we can that is best for all businesses and the residents of the state?
And I would add one more thing to that. There is a very large group of business leaders that came together in just like a 3-day time to do this. So I would say that probably speaks volumes to their servant heart for wanting to serve their communities, because it's they've got other jobs. So there's a lot of time and a lot of effort put into this.
Absolutely, yes. And you two both, thank you very much for everything, for doing this interview and leading these committees. I know I've sat on the communication committee and listened to it, and I was on the essential business subcommittee earlier just to listen in, and you all have done great things. So we really appreciate it, and you taking your time. So
it's been fun.
Lauren. It's been fun.
Thank you. Good. Well, thank you all. Hope you have a great day, and
You too.
we will, I'm sure, chat again shortly.
Mm-hmm.